This video is about inequalities involving absolute values. So we already did equations involving absolute value. And remember, we always had two equations then that we had to solve because absolute value was distance from 0. So for 3, for example, 3 and negative 3 are both 3 from 0. So we had two equations to do. So the same thing is going to hold for inequalities. We're going to have two things for each problem. Now, remember compound inequalities, these are just special types of compounds, so less than are and problems, so remember those should have an overlap. And greater, or as I say greater, are or problems, so those you just graph both on the number line. Remember though, absolute value is positive. So if you have absolute value is less than a negative, or even less than 0, it could equal 0, but it can't actually be less than 0 because it should be positive. So remember, if you would see absolute value less than a negative or less than 0, this should be no solution. Now, if you were to not recognize that right away and you were to solve it, it is a less than, so there should be an and, but if you were to graph it, you'd end up with one outside, one inside, and there is no overlap, so that should again show you that there is no solution. Now, absolute value greater than a negative, okay, that's always going to happen, so that would be all real numbers because you should always be greater than a negative number if you're taking the absolute value. Now, if it was 0 though, there would be a number that would actually make that greater than 0. So if you were to graph it and you didn't recognize that right away, you would have an or where one's going to the right and the other's going left, and they overlap all along that, so the whole number line would be shaded in. So let's just do two examples. So the first example, we have absolute value of m plus 2 is less than 11, so less than is and. So I need to write my two inequalities. M plus 2 is less than 11, and m plus 2 with the negative 11. So just like in equality or equations, you're going to have 11 and negative 11. However, when you write the negative version, okay, the regular one is just the sign they gave you, in this case less than, but the negative one, you have to flip that inequality sign, just like when you're solving inequalities. So we have m plus 2 is less than 11, we can solve. We get m is less than 9, and then we have m plus 2 is greater than negative 11, because remember we had to switch the inequality. So we subtract the 2, and we get m is greater than negative 13. So, number line, I'm just going to put my two numbers, so number line negative 13 smaller, so that comes first, and then 9. Now a common thing is people will graph the 9 with the 13 because the 9's on the left, but 9, less than 9, that's this problem up here. Okay, so less than 9 open circles should be to the left, and greater than 13, that's an open, and greater's to the right, which is good because we want an overlap, so I'm going to stop those at those endpoints there, because that was an and. Now this next problem, 3m plus 6 is greater than or equal to 12. Greater is or. You still have to write your two inequalities. Just like before, when you write the negative version, make sure you change the inequality to face the other direction, so it's less than in this case instead. So we're going to solve both of these. So subtracting 6 from both sides, we get 3m is greater than or equal to 6, divided by 3, m is greater than or equal to 2. Solving the other one, again subtracting 6, 3m is less than or equal to negative 18, divided by 3, m is greater than or equal to negative 6. Again, that's an or, so we just graph them both on the same number line. Again, make sure you put them in order. So negative 6 is smaller, that comes first. So greater than or equal to 2, make sure you graph with the corresponding number. Closed in, it's an or, so we don't need any overlap, we just graph where we need to. So greater than is to the right, and less than or equal to negative 6, again closed, and less than is to the left. Oops. So that's all there is to inequalities with absolute value. Make sure you solve both parts of the inequality. Each one should have two answers. One greater is or, less than is and. And if you have a negative number to start with here, those are going to be special cases of either no solution or all real numbers.